The first event on this film is the Powys Enduro in 1977, which started in the old station yard in Llanfochlin. Jim pushes his Suzuki PE 250, complete with rather large front oval, towards the start. His mate Bob Room was number 20 on a Jawa 250. Number 4 outfit is S. Wass on a Norbass 650. I presume that's a Norton BSA. Number 12 is Eddie Stokes from Newbury on a CZ 250. The course was 143 miles, and in the programme there's a list of garages where they can get petrol. Not many of those still exist. Here Jim is coming down a track to head out to the special test on the moors above Carno, where the event has started for many years. Jim ended up with a gold. This marshal here is none other than your film camera woman heading out to another vantage point on board a Suzuki 250 trail bike. Beside the forest track, Jim was surprised to see me filming as he flashed past. The winner was Keith Gush on a 125 Rickman. Runner-up was Vic Madeley on a 125 Fantic, and none other than Peter Duke, son of Jeff, was the best 125cc rider on board a 125 Gilera. And as they say, now for something completely different. Up on Scout Moor, the Rosendale Club held the first multi-lap enduro, and 150 riders set off in bright summer sunshine. The course included some of the best farmland and bogs in Lancashire, with the notorious Dog Bottom Wood. The South Liverpool Motor Club had a lot of competitors, including Ken Franklin on his Triumph Matisse, Jim Jones on his trusty PE 250, Dave Harrison on a Bulto Trials bike, and Stevie O'Brien on his Kawasaki 250, which he actually used for sand racing. And Frank Anderton was out on his trusty BSA 440. Also in the list were Bob Room on a Jawa 350, the Borre brothers again, Frank Melling, Penny Page, Colin Shutt. And the range of machines was interesting. Unlike today, there were Mako, Ozza, Rickman, KTM, Husky, Triumph, CZ, MZ, Montesa, a DWES, whatever that is, and all the Japanese makers. The early part of the course was up a hillside, covered in bracken. Fortunately for some riders, there was a little lay-by halfway up where they could take a bit of a rest. It actually proved quite tricky, especially for some of the scrambles type bikes. But you'll notice the trials riders, including Davey Harry, had absolutely no trouble at all. Numbered 66 on a Kawasaki, according to the programme, is Joey Speakman. And he had to have a little rest in the lay-by. When Jim came round on his second lap, he started overtaking some of the late starters who'd been struggling at the bottom of the hill. Once again, the PE proved its worth as it pulled up the sandy going quite easily. In the notorious Dog Bottom Wood, it was more like a trials section. No problem for Davy Harry. Nor Joey Speakman. There were a few lines to choose from here, so riders were able to get around anyone who stopped. Here we see Jim coming up the hill, and he takes the left-hand lane beside the stone wall before heading out onto the moorland. Kenny does the same as he overtakes some fallen riders. The course included some great woodland and some fantastic open moorland going. But down in the boggy bits, some riders needed a lot of help, especially this guy on a big 500 yam. Moor, you'll be able to recognise some of them. There's Jim, Kenny, Davy Harry, Joey Speakman, Dave Tomlin's waving at me, Jim Sandiford, who would be the eventual winner. Oh, here's the guy on the big yam again. I think he only did one lap. He spent most of the time stuck in a bog. Lap after lap, the riders went round and round, and I kept seeing them, some falling off, unfortunately in front of the camera, much to their dismay. But you can see the spots of rain now on the lens, and eventually, as Jim came in for what would be his last lap, the organisers decided that they better cut the event short. Martin Fryer on a Suzuki was the runner-up, and only 15 finishers were awarded medals, and the rest just got certificates. This event was only run for a few years, and in 1978 only 5 experts managed to finish due to the horrendous weather. Derek Edmondson won that year on an SWM, and Jim was the best over 250 on another SWM. And Chris blew up his Yamaha at the start, and Jim Sandiford lent him a Montesa, and he won the best 125. The next event on this film is the infamous Nant Hwch, which this year was a charity event in 1977. It was a charity enduro which started at Llanrwyd Wells. 155 riders set off in glorious sunshine. Jim is number 12 on his trusty PE, and Ken is out on his Triumph Matisse. But poor O'Brien Beasley couldn't start his Beta. Lots of clubmen retired as the event had a reputation for going through some big bad bogs in the forest. It was a lovely sunny day in this part of Wales. Jim only managed a silver as he had a very slow special test time. Bob Room was out again on his 350 Jawa, but he would retire. Dave Bickers was out on a Suzuki 250, and he would win the event, being fastest on the special tests. But it would be Tony Davis and John Knight who would be the fastest up the hill climb. Who remembers when enduros had a hill climb? Kenny Williams was out on a Bultaco and got a gold. The time checks at this event are so laid back, with just a car and somebody taking the cards to write down the times. Jim comes into the time check, and his son Mike is trying to wheelie his Bultaco Trials bike. At this part of the course where I was watching, the sun was shining and the dust was being kicked up. But inside the forest was a different story, where the deep bogs were claiming a lot of the entry and many would retire. Right at the end of this little film clip, check out the hairstyles on some of the spectators. I hope you don't recognise anybody. The Tour of Wales had begun as a scooter event, organised by the Liverpool Scooter Club. The entry list was mainly Vespers and Lambrettas, and the route was done with a ball and arrow. But now, in 1978, the event was well established in the calendar as a proper enduro. And on a cold February morning in the centre of Ruthin, riders gathered in the cold rain. There was a big entry on a wide variety of machines. Jim was out on his PE again, Brian Beasley on his Beta, and Ken on his Triumph Matisse, riding alongside a guy on a Yamaha 500. Out on the track below the Clwyd Ranges that the South Liverpool Motor Club used in the Foster Cup trial, here's Penny Page, number 15 on her Bull Taco, coming into a time control. Lots of sidecars in this event, and the winner was Hwch with passenger B. Hayward on board a BMW 750. Also in the entry list was Jeff Chandler on a CZ 250. In the programme, Nick Banks, the clerk of the course, comments that he hopes the weather will be kinder than the previous year when it was the Arctic Tour of Wales. Anyone who rode it will remember it snowed and lots of riders were left stranded out on the course in terrible conditions. Well, this year it would be wet, but Nick had found some new parts, virgin forest, and in the morning the course went out through Nant, Afon Wen, Moor Arthur, Plas Newid and back to Ruthin for lunch. Then in the afternoon it went out through Alwyn to the Clochainog forest, where I managed to film some of the bogs. You might spot Charlie Bourne here, smiling as he goes past in the ruts. It's actually quite hard to read the numbers, but one rider going past is Cummins on a Beta, and he was the eventual winner of the clubman class. Plenty of water as the riders splashed through. The sidecars of course had no trouble at all. But the solos, some of them took it a bit slowly, making sure they didn't drown their engines. Dave Bickers was fastest again on the cross-country test, and C. Lynch was quickest up the hill climb. Ken was excluded, don't know what he did, and Jim managed only a bronze. Ivor Smart was aboard his Yamaha IT, and there were some other unusual machines that you might spot: a Moto Regit 175, a CCM, Yamahas, Hondas, Montesas, Bull Tacos, Makos, Husky, Suzuki's, Rickmans, a CZ and an FPS. The solo expert winner was M. Childs on a KTM 250. It was a good event that year and everyone enjoyed it. Nick always put on a good event. But back at the finish, there are some very tired and muddy riders who collected together to discuss the course and ask each other how on earth they went on. Riders don't seem to get this muddy nowadays, do they? April Fool's Day 1978 saw the running of the first Hwch 100 at Hawkstone Park, run by the North Cheshire Trail Bike Club. This probably rates as one of the very first Hare and Hounds events. Frank Melling organised many of them in the late 70s. He's now, of course, responsible for the fantastic annual Thunder Sprint, which takes place in Northwich Town Centre. The start was at the bottom of the famous hill, and riders had to complete 20 laps of the 5-mile course, which it contained one observed section. There was a compulsory 1-hour lunch break after 10 laps. Then some riders were wrongly directed up the hill by mistake and they had to be given a time allowance. For most riders taking part in this event, it was a chance to ride this famous motocross track. The entry list included Jack Matthews on a new 175 SWM, Bob Room on a 360 KTM, Ivor Smart on his IT, Eddie Mace, Rowley Redding and the Borre brothers, more used to sidecar racing. Brian dropped his bike on the climb down, had to push it to the bottom, then he couldn't start the bike. Fortunately, his dad was on hand to give him a bit of advice. Rider after rider came down the hill because there were over 150 riders, so the course got a bit clogged up. Here's Jack trying to start his SWM. Off he goes with a big handful of the throttle. This part of the course actually proved quite tricky, especially when riders were stopped. But here's Jim, feet up, going through, brake on, nice slow and steady as he gets past quite a few riders with the help of a few surreptitious feet. Ken's right behind him. He takes a different line round the tree. Then Frank sent them out across the field that's now used as the car park when the motocross is on. This was in an attempt to lengthen the course. So off they went for a bit of a grass track round a tree and back into the woods again. And here we come to a stoppage where riders had to queue and wait their turn to get through. Here's Brian pushing his way past everyone. Form an orderly line, lads. Here's Jim again, circulating quite smoothly. But even so, plenty of people were falling off, even though there was a clear path. And just watch this bit. Oh, it's a good job there's no sound on this film. Of course, the route for the Enduro didn't just stay on the motocross track. Oh no, that would be too easy. Hindhead Farm has lots of woods with sandy little tracks in them, and Frank Melling sent the riders off through the woods. Back in these days, most people rode converted bikes for Enduro, either trials bikes or trail bikes. But now some proper Enduro bikes were coming on the market, and Jim reckoned his PE 250 was one of the best bikes he'd ever had. He won the club's championship on it, riding in a scramble, a motocross, a grass track, a sand race and an Enduro, and even a hill climb. And it's great to see now, all these years later, that the PEs are in the 6 days vintage trophy. Who would have thought it? Of course, the real fun was on the whoopy sections, where the Enduro riders of course rode up and down all the whoops rather than jumping them. In fact, it's difficult to see anybody doing any jumps of any kind. The course proved quite tricky for a lot of people, as round and round and round they went. It's quite difficult to name all the riders, but I'm sure you'll recognise many of them. And look out for the tricky going down the hill, where some riders managed to get through smoothly and easily, others fell off. After a good event in a smashing venue, the winner was Martin Fryer, with Jeff Hastings on a Moto Regit second and Vic Madeley on a 125 Fantic in third place.